just as the captain and master were talking about the pervader and the signifying symbol. The next page, Sri Ramakrishna was talking thus to captain and the devotees when Jai Gopal Sen and Trailokya of the Brahmo Samaj arrived. They saluted the master and sat down. Sri Ramakrishna looked at Trailokya with a smile and continued the conversation. For those of you that just got here, we're at the top of page 790 if you're following along in your Gospels. Master, it is on account of the ego that one is not able to see God. In front of the door of God's mansion lies the stump of ego. One cannot enter the mansion without jumping over the stump. There was once a man who had acquired the power to tame ghosts. One day, at his summons, a ghost appeared. The ghost said, "Now tell me what you want me to do. The moment you cannot give me any work, I shall break your neck." The man had many things to accomplish, and he had the ghost do them all, one by one. At last, he could not find anything more for the ghost to do. "Now," said the ghost, "I am going to break your neck." "Wait a minute," said the man. "I shall return presently." He ran to his teacher and said, "Revered sir, I'm in great danger. This is my trouble." And he told his teacher his trouble and asked, "What shall I do now?" The teacher said, "Do this. Tell the ghost to straighten this kinky hair." The ghost devoted itself day and night to straightening the hair, but how could it make a kinky hair straight? The hair immediately remained kinky. Likewise, the ego seems to vanish this moment, but it reappears the next. Unless one renounces the ego, one does not receive the grace of God. Suppose there is a feast in a house, and the master of the house puts a man in charge of the stores. As long as the man remains in the storeroom, the master doesn't go there. But when of his own will he renounces the storeroom and goes away, the master locks it and takes charge himself. A guardian is appointed only for a minor. A boy cannot safeguard his property. Therefore, the king assumes responsibility for him. God does not take over our responsibilities unless we renounce our ego. Once Lakshmi and Narayana were seated in Vaikuntha when Narayana suddenly stood up. Lakshmi had been stroking his feet. She said, "Lord, where are you going?" Narayana answered, "One of my devotees is in great danger. I must save him." With these words, he went out, but he came back immediately. Lakshmi said, "Lord, why have you returned so soon?" Narayana smiled and said, "The devotee was going along the road, overwhelmed with love for me. Some washermen were drying clothes in the grass, and the devotee walked over the clothes. At this, the washermen chased him and were going to beat him with their sticks. So I ran out to protect him." "But why have you come back?" asked Lakshmi. Narayana laughed and said, "I saw the devotee himself picking up a brick to throw at them, so I came back." I said to Keshav, "You must renounce your ego." Keshav replied, "If I do, how can I keep my organization together?" I said to him, "How slow you are to understand. I'm not asking you to renounce the ripe ego, the ego that makes a man feel he is a servant of God or his devotee. Give up the unripe ego, the ego that creates attachment to lust and greed, the ego that makes a man feel he is God's servant. His child is the ripe ego. It doesn't harm one." Trilokya. It's very difficult to get rid of the ego. People only think they are free from it. Master. Gauri would not refer to himself as I, lest he should feel egotistic. He would say this instead. I followed his example and would refer to myself as this instead of I. Instead of saying, I have eaten, I would say, this has eaten. Mathur noticed it and said one day, what is this, revered father? Why should you talk that way? Let them talk that way. They have their egotism. You are free from it. You don't have to talk like them. I said to Keshav, since the ego cannot be given up, let it remain as the servant of God. Prahlada had two moods. Sometimes he would feel that he was God. In that mood he would say, thou art verily I, and I am verily thou. But when he was conscious of his ego, he felt that God was the master and he was the servant. After a man is firmly established in the ideal of I am he can live as God's servant. He may think of himself as the servant of God. To Captain. When a man attains the knowledge of Brahman, he shows certain characteristics. The Bhagavata describes 4 of them. Excuse me. The state of a child, of an inert being, of a madman, and of a ghoul. Sometimes the knower of Brahman acts like a 5-year-old child. Sometimes he acts like a madman. Sometimes he remains like an inert thing. In this state he cannot work. He renounces all action. You may say that jnanis like Janaka are active. The truth is that people in olden times gave responsibility to their subordinate officers and thus freed themselves from worry. Further, at that time, men possessed intense faith. Sri Ramakrishna began to speak about the renunciation of action. But he also said that those who felt they must do their duties should do them in a detached spirit. Master, after attaining knowledge, one cannot do much work. Trilokya. Why so, sir? Pabhari Baba was a great yogi, and yet he reconciled people's quarrels, even lawsuits. Master. Yes, that's true. Dr. Dugacharan was a great drunkard. He used to drink 24 hours a day. But he was precise in his actions. He did not make any mistake in treating his patients. There is no harm in doing work after the attainment of bhakti, but it is very hard. One needs intense tapasya. It is God who does everything. We are instruments. We are his instruments. Some Sikh said to me in front of the Kali temple, God is compassionate. I said, to whom is he compassionate? Why, revered sir, to all of us, said the Sikhs. I said, we are his children. Does compassion to one's own children mean much? A father must look after his children, or do you expect the people of the neighborhood to bring them up? Well, won't those who say that God is compassionate ever understand that we are God's children and not someone else's? Captain, you are right. They don't regard God as their very own. Master, should we not then address God as compassionate? Of course we should, as long as we practice sadhana. After realizing God, one rightly feels that God is our father or mother. As long as we have not realized God, we feel that we are very far away from him, children of someone else. During the stages of sadhana, one should describe God by all his attributes. One day Hazra said to Narendra, God is infinity. Infinite is his splendor. Do you think he will accept your offerings of sweets and bananas or listen to your music? This is a mistaken notion of yours. Narendra at once sank 10 fathoms. So I said to Hazrat, you villain, where will these youngsters be if you talk to them like that? How can a man live if he gives up devotion? No doubt God has infinite splendor, yet he is under the control of his devotees. A rich man's gatekeeper comes to the parlor when his master is seated with his friends. He stands on one side of the room. In his hand he has something covered with a cloth. He is very hesitant. The master asks him, well, gatekeeper, what have you in your hand? Very hesitantly, the servant takes out a custard apple from under the cover, places it in front of the master, and says, Sir, it is my desire that you should eat this. The master is impressed by his servant's devotion. With great love, he takes the fruit in his hand and says, Ah, this is a very nice custard apple. Where did you pick it? You must have taken a great deal of trouble to get it. God is under the control of his devotees. King Duryodhana was very attentive to Krishna and said to him, Please have your meal here. But the Lord went to Vidura's hut. He is very fond of his devotees. He ate Vidura's simple rice and greens as if they were celestial food. Sometimes a perfect jnani behaves like a ghoul. He does not discriminate about food and drink, holiness and unholiness. A perfect knower of God and a perfect idiot have the same outer signs. A perfect jnani perhaps does not utter the mantras while bathing in the Ganges. While worshiping God, perhaps he offers all the flowers together at his feet. He doesn't utter the mantras, nor does he observe the rituals. A man cannot renounce action as long as he desires worldly enjoyment. As long as one cherishes a desire for enjoyment, one performs action. A bird sat absent-mindedly on the mast of a ship anchored in the Ganges. Slowly the ship sailed out into the ocean. When the bird came to its senses, it could find no shore in any direction. It flew toward the north, hoping to reach land. It went very far and grew very tired, but could find no shore. What could it do? It returned to the ship and sat on the mast. After a long while, the bird flew away again, this time toward the east. It couldn't find land in that direction either. Everywhere it saw nothing but limitless ocean. Very tired, it again returned to the ship and sat on the mast. After resting a long while, the bird went toward the south, then toward the west. When it found no sign of land in any direction, it came back and settled down on the mast. It did not leave the mast again, but sat there without making any further effort. It no longer felt restless or worried because it was free from worry. It made no further effort. Captain, what an illustration. Master, worldly people wander about to the four quarters of the earth for the sake of happiness. They don't find it anywhere. They only become tired and weary. When through their attachment to lust and greed, they only suffer misery, they feel an urge toward dispassion and renunciation. Most people cannot renounce lust and greed without first enjoying it. There are two sorts of people, those who stay in one place and those who go about to many places. There are some sadhakas who visit many sacred places. They cannot settle down in one spot. They must drink the water of many holy places. Thus, roaming about, they satisfy their unfulfilled desires. And at last, They build a hut in one place and settle down there. Then, free from worry and effort, they meditate on God. But what is there to enjoy in the world? Lust and greed? That is only a momentary pleasure. One moment it exists, and the next moment it disappears. The world is like an overcast sky that steadily pours down rain. The face of the sun is seldom seen. There is mostly suffering in the world. On account of the cloud of lust and greed, one cannot see the sun. Some people ask me, "Sir, why has God created such a world? Is there no way out for us?" I say to them, why shouldn't there be a way out? Take shelter with God and pray to him with a yearning heart for a favorable wind, that you may have things in your favor. If you call on him with yearning, he will surely listen to you. A man had a son who was on the point of death. In a frenzy, he asked remedies of different people. One of them said, "Here is a remedy. First, it must rain when the star Svati is in the ascendant. Then some of the rain must fall into a skull. Then a frog must come there to drink the water, and a snake must chase it. And when the snake is about to bite the frog must hop away, and the poison must fall in the skull. You should give the patient a little of the poison and rainwater from the skull." The father set out eagerly to find the medicine when the star Svati was in the sky. It started raining. Fervently he said to God, "O Lord, please get a skull for me." Searching here and there, he at last found a skull with rainwater in it. Again he prayed to God, saying, "O Lord, I beseech thee, please help me find the frog and the snake." Since he had great longing, he got the frog and the snake also. In the twinkling of an eye, he saw a snake chasing a frog, and as it was about to bite the frog, its poison fell into the skull. If one takes shelter with God and prays to him with great longing, God will surely listen. He will certainly make everything favorable. Captain, what an apt illustration. Master, yes, God makes everything favorable. Perhaps the aspirant doesn't marry. Thus he is able to devote his whole attention to God. Or perhaps his brothers earn the family's livelihood. Or perhaps a son takes on the responsibilities of the family. Then the aspirant will not have to bother about the world. He can give 100% of his mind to God. But one cannot succeed unless one renounces lust and greed. Only by renunciation is ignorance destroyed. The sun's rays falling on a lens burn many objects. But if a room is dark inside, you cannot get that result. You must come out of the room to use the lens. But some people live in the world even after attaining jnana. They see both what is inside and what is outside the room. The light of God illumines the world. Therefore, with that light, they can discriminate between good and bad, permanent and impermanent. The ignorant who lead a worldly life without knowing God are like people living in a house with mud walls. With the help of a dim light, they can see the inside of the house, but nothing more. But those who live in the world after having attained knowledge and realized God are the people living in a glass house. They see the inside of the room and also all that is outside. The light from the sun of knowledge enters strongly into the room. They perceive everything inside the room very clearly. They know what is good and what is bad, what is permanent and what is impermanent. God alone is the doer, and we are all his instruments. Therefore, it is impossible, even for a jnani, to be egotistic. The writer of a hymn to Shiva felt proud of his achievement, but his pride was dashed to pieces when Shiva's bull bared his teeth. He saw that each tooth was a word of the hymn. Do you understand the meaning of this? The words had existed from the beginningless past. The writer had only discovered them. It is not good to be a guru by profession. One cannot be a teacher without a command from God. He who says he is a guru, the footnote on this says, the word means both spiritual teacher and heaviness, is a man of mean intelligence. Haven't you seen a balance? The lighter side goes higher. He who is spiritually higher than the others does not consider himself a guru. The footnote on that one is, the meaning is that if a man thinks of himself as a guru, he is heavy and goes down, like the heavier pan of a balance. Everyone wants to be a teacher, but a disciple is hard to find. Trilokya was seated on the floor to the north of the small couch. He was going to sing. Sri Ramakrishna said to him, "Ah, how sweetly you sing." Trilokya sang to the accompaniment of a tampura. "I have joined my heart to thee. All that exists art thou. Thee only have I found, for thou art all that exists. O Lord, beloved of my heart, thou art the home of all. Where indeed is the heart in which thou dost not dwell? Thou hast entered every heart. All that exists art thou. Whether sage or fool, whether Hindu or Mussulman, thou makest them as thou wilt. All that exists art thou. Thy presence is everywhere, whether in heaven or in Kaaba. Before thee all must bow, for thou art all that exists. From earth below to the highest heaven, from heaven to deepest earth, I see thee wherever I look. All that exists art thou. Pondering, I have understood. I have seen it beyond a doubt. I find not a single thing that may be compared to thee. To Jafar, it has been revealed that thou art all that exists." Jafar is the author of the song. He sang again, "Thou art my all in all, O Lord, the life of my life, the essence of essence. In the three worlds I have none else but thee to call my own. Thou art my peace, my joy, my hope. Thou my support, my wealth, my glory. Thou art my wisdom and my strength. Thou art my home, my place of rest, my dearest friend, my next of kin, my present and my future, thou, my heaven and my salvation. Thou art my scriptures, my commandments. Thou art my ever-gracious Guru. Thou the spring of my boundless bliss. Thou art the way and thou the goal. Thou the adorable one, O Lord. Thou art the mother tender-hearted. Thou the chastising father. Thou the creator and protector. Thou the helmsman who dost steer my craft across the sea of life." I think many of you will remember that as to the tune that Bordaprana wrote for it, and the choir sang it very often, which we're not singing right now during COVID. We will again, though. While Sri Ramakrishna listened to the songs, he was overwhelmed with emotion. Again and again he said, "Ah, thou art all. Ah me, ah me." The music was over. It was 6:00 in the evening. Sri Ramakrishna went to the pine grove, M accompanying him. Sri Ramakrishna was laughing and talking. Suddenly he said to M, "Why haven't you eaten any refreshments? Why haven't the others eaten either?" He was eager for the devotees to take some refreshments. Sri Ramakrishna was to go to Calcutta in the evening. While returning from the pine grove, he said to M, "I don't know who will take me to Calcutta in his carriage." I'm going to stop there for a moment. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Because we're starting another conversation. Any questions or comments from anyone? Okay, we'll read a little bit more. It was evening. A lamp was lighted in Sri Ramakrishna's room, and incense was burnt. Lamps also were lighted in the different temples and buildings. The orchestra was playing in the Nahabat. Soon the evening service would begin in the temples. Sri Ramakrishna sat on the small couch. After chanting the names of different deities, he meditated on the Divine Mother. The evening service was over. Sri Ramakrishna paced the room, now and then talking to the devotees. He also consulted M about his going to Calcutta. Presently, Narendra arrived. He was accompanied by Sharat and one or two other young devotees. They all saluted the master. At the sight of Narendra, Sri Ramakrishna's love overflowed. He tenderly touched Narendra's chin as one touches a baby's to show one's love. He said in a loving voice, "Ah, you have come." The master was standing in his room facing the Ganges. Narendra and his young friends were talking to him facing the east. The master turned towards him and said, "Narendra has come. How can I go to Calcutta now? I sent for Narendra. How can I go now? What do you think?" M, "As you wish, sir. Let us put it off today." Master, "All right, we shall go tomorrow, either by boat or by carriage." To the other devotees, "It is late. Go home now." One by one, the devotees saluted him and departed. And that's the end of that chapter. So next week, we will start Car Festival at Balaram's house. Any comments or questions? Don't forget, tomorrow, Raja Prana will be giving a talk that will be on Zoom and YouTube, The Living Presence. And once again, Wednesday, we will not be having the Gospel of Holy Mother. We're starting the Eternal Companion at 4:30. Next Saturday, we'll have the Gospel of Ramakrishna as usual. The bookstore is open Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And the temple is open for Vespers, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 6 to 6:45. We're working on getting open, but slowly. It's good to see all of you. Good to see you, Shelley. You look well. And I think we'll end with a chant. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna